Welcome to the Professional Muslim Women Podcast, a place for working Muslim women to share their stories, struggles, triumphs, and lessons learned along the way in pursuit of their careers. I'm Dr. Kali Hussein.
And I'm Dr. Hani Ahmed. And in this podcast, we bring inspirational, trailblazing, successful, and fulfilled professional Muslim women to you.
Get ready to be inspired and learn how you can forge your own path as well. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome back to the Professional Muslim Woman Podcast. I'm very excited to introduce today's guest. It is Dr. Samira Hassan. Dr. Samira Hassan is a general practitioner with a specialist interest in palliative care, medical education, and global health. She studied at Cardiff University Medical School before completing her GP training in Leicester. Dr. Hassan is also a keen community activist who's impacting change in her community through servant leadership. She is passionate about youth mentorship and raising aspirations in the Somali community. This has led to the birth of the Somali Careers Fair initiative, which began in Leicester, but has since spread across several cities in the UK and abroad. Dr. Hassan continues to organize and support many careers fairs for the Somali community in the UK. She's also a public speaker, engaging with students and universities in career aspirations, inspiring community engagement, and leadership in healthcare. She's also one of the founding members of the British Somali Medical Association and serves as vice president. In that role, she worked on developing the foundation of this young organization whose mission includes widening access to medical training, peer support and mentorship, professional development, community engagement, health advocacy, and health education. Improving access to healthcare services for the Somali community and raising health awareness is one of her key priorities. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Samira Hassan. Hi, Samira.
Hi, Kali. Thank you. Thank you so much for the warm welcome and the introduction. And I'm excited. I'm excited to join you today.
I'm really excited to have you on here. I think I met Samira on Snappy on a Facebook professional group about almost a year and a half ago. And
Indeed,
we've just been going back and forth. I think the first time I talked to you on the phone, it was like 2 hours.
I know. Mashallah, it was. Mashallah. You know what? I have to say this. I have been so excited to watch you grow, not only in your profession and your career, but also the work you do, mashallah, in the community, and this podcast in particular, which has been phenomenal. So I just want to start off by thanking you and Henny for putting this out for us, because we've learned so much and I'm so excited to be part of it as well. So thank you.
Oh, the pleasure is ours. We are so happy to have you. So we are a big fan of Samira's work. The work that she has started, especially with the careers fairs, that's one of the topic that actually brought us together through social media, is one of the things that we really just find inspirational. And we're big fans. She's been very effective in starting this in the Somali community in the UK and across Europe, and it's just spread everywhere. And we've been trying to copy that for some time. So let's get started with, how did your journey into medicine and this community outreach and activity begin for you?
Okay, so for me, it started way back where I was born. I was born in the UAE in a little town called Quwain. And basically, I had such a sheltered and protected childhood growing up in the Middle East. And we went to private schools and everything was very much education focused. And my parents, alhamdulillah, have instilled in me and my siblings the need to make sure that we forge a path for ourselves in the future with our education and through our education. And then came the point where we had to move on to the next ladder of the education, which is the universities. And my parents at this point decided to bring us over to the UK. But the way it worked out for me was that we came in two different sections. So myself and my brothers came initially, and we stayed with my aunt in Cardiff. Habrir Hawa. Shout out to Habrir Hawa. And honestly, I think that was one of the most profound and life-changing experiences of my life. Because coming into the UK at the age of 15, it was a bit of a culture shock, even though I didn't expect that to be the case, because we went to private schools and we did the international British curriculum, and it was very much focused towards the British education. But I still felt a bit of a culture shock, because this was the first time in my life that I was put slap bang in the middle of a Somali community. I haven't seen so many Somalis in my life before. I really struggled with the Somali language, and it's quite ironic now because I've learned it quite well. But back then I really struggled. which meant that my experience with the local Somali community was not pleasant, to say the least, in the first few years. And so it meant that I really had to develop my own voice. I was used to being one of 6 girls in this large family, and I blended in. And then all of a sudden, I had to fend for myself and speak for myself. And even the experiences that growing up I had was quite different to my cousins and my aunts because they came from Somalia at that point. So it was very much a massive culture clash. And that was the first time I had to really develop within myself my own voice. And alhamdulillah, as much as it was a really tough experience for me, it really, I think, made me the person I am today. And so when I was first introduced to the Somali community, there were so many things I was able to see were massively contrasted in terms of the differences with my upbringing and what I felt were the ideals of society where I grew up. For example, the focus on education. Now, although, of course, I went to school as well, I finished part of my schooling education in the UK. I noticed the ethos of education and the attitude to education was completely different to the attitude to education I was used to growing up and the value people placed. And when I say the value, I meant the students.
Yep.
I feel like the parents always place a much higher value on it, but I felt the students probably weren't quite connected to the why and the reason, which I guess most kids are nowadays, but it was massively different to my thinking because I came into the UK with one focus, and that was to get an education and develop a life for myself. So that took a lot of getting used to. And then even throughout my university studies and my career, I noticed this massive divide between what we needed as a Somali society to thrive in this Western society and what our kids were attaining, either due to lack of opportunity or the current education system or just how society was set up too, which almost felt to me was disadvantaging Somali kids in particular, but I'm sure most ethnic minority kids.
Right.
And therefore, that's where the idea of a careers fair came about in the first place. So alhamdulillah, I just decided after I finished my high school and my university training, and I felt like I had a little bit of time where I felt I was a bit more established within myself and that I had the support of a few of the people I spoke to within the community, I decided to give it a go. But I had never expected it to take a life of its own like it has at the moment. I really had not foreseen this. I didn't realize that it was just going to blow out of proportion like it did.
So did you start the careers fair before you went to medical school, or was it afterwards?
No, I did it years after. So I started the careers fair almost 3.5 years ago now. So this was well after my university. I graduated in 2012 and then I moved to Leicester, which is another city in the UK. And this is when I moved back in with my family. And again, I noticed the same problems that I've noticed in the other city that I was living in. And so I thought at this point, because I'm going to base myself in Leicester, I might as well start doing some sort of change. And I thought long and hard about it. And then I realized if I was somebody who was a young student who didn't have any sense of direction and was looking for that sense of direction, what would I want to see? And I thought instead of giving them lectures about the different careers that are out there, why don't you show them people who look like them, sound like them, probably grew up in the same neighborhoods, in the same circumstances as they have, but have managed to make something of themselves. I just wanted that to be that level of inspiration that makes kids aspire towards something greater than just education and just the life as they know it at the moment.
Right. You can't be what you can't see.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that statement.
Yeah, I think that actually statement was made by Miriam Edelbright, I believe. She was a child advocate. I think she was a lawyer. How do you expect kids to aspire to be something when they can't see someone who looks like them, being in that position or having those goals and aspirations? Mashallah. So before you got into the child activism, what was your journey into medicine like?
Okay, so stepping that right back, from what I can remember, my parents and all my family members who knew me since I was really young would always say to me that I walked around saying I've always wanted to be a doctor. I don't quite remember that. I just remember it being something that was repeated to me multiple times. But of course, I developed a love for it, particularly since I came to the UK. I've always known I wanted to do something in the sciences. And I thought, a profession in medicine would be the right thing to do to make, mom and dad proud. But I wasn't sure at that point that it was definitely something I wanted to do for me. But during my high school years in the UK, I was given the opportunity to do some work experience and some shadowing placements, which I was able to organize for myself, but also supported by my school. And alhamdulillah, in that process, I noticed that I really did love this as a profession for myself. So what had happened was I, of course, worked towards that. I tried my best to get the best grades I could because it is really competitive getting into medicine anywhere in the world, but especially as well in the UK. And I decided to apply for medicine. But what happened in that year, So normally the way it works in the UK, and I guess it's pretty much the same in the US, is that you apply the year before and then you go through an interview cycle, an application cycle, and then it's the following year from applications when you start if you are successful. So during that year, after I submitted my applications and I did some of my interviews, I went through a change in my life. And this very much coincided with the fact that I was still grappling with finding my voice and my identity in society. And I really felt a massive loss of confidence within myself because I struggled to find my voice for many years, as you know, during my late teens and early 20s, because I just found that I didn't fit in the conventional sense. Partly because I was constantly reminded that I didn't speak very good Somali. So I always felt a little belittled.
Mm-hmm.
But also because I left the cocoon and the comfort of my family and my parents and my sisters and siblings. And I really struggled to integrate. So during that process, I went through a lot of internal conflict. And looking back now, I could say I was a little bit depressed for various reasons and different influences and different elements during my late teens. And then I decided to turn to the deen a lot more. And at this point, decided to dedicate most of my time to learning about the deen and the aqidah and the Quran. And I would go to, you know, a lot of the lessons in the mosque and the halaqas, spent a lot of time and found within that a glimpse of peace within myself. And it gave me a lot of strength. So the medical school application happened to coincide with that, so that by the end of that application cycle, I had decided within myself that medicine wasn't for me after all, because I was scared away with the fact that I kept reading headlines in the newspaper about junior doctors working 100-hour weeks. And it started to make me question whether this is actually compatible with the life I wanted to lead. And I also did want to feel that I would sign my life away to a career. I've always felt that there was more to me than just a career. And also I worried about all the religious aspects of remixing and so many other different parts that medicine expects you to do.
Mm-hmm.
So in that time, I went through a lot of months of inner soul searching. And although this was something I was almost felt like I was working towards my entire life, it was a very difficult decision, but I decided that medicine wasn't for me after all. And I remember having that conversation with my dad over the phone. My dad has always been obviously my biggest supporter when it comes to education. And we would always talk things through in detail. And he was in Abu Dhabi at that time, still working. So I remember that conversation quite distinctly to this very day, where I told him quite assertively that, Abu, this is definitely not something I want to do. And I'm not saying this on a whim. And he took it all in and he said, you know, as long as you're sure, I support your decision. So I was given an offer of medicine, but I did the one thing that no other student probably does, is decline an offer to go to medical school, which is what I did. And then the following years after that, I've always known I wanted to go to university and have a career. But I spent the next 2.5 years after that trying to find what that career would be. And I went through this massive list and I did so many work experience and shadowing placements. And I applied to so many different healthcare professions, including occupational therapy, physiotherapy, audiology, nursing, but lab sciences, research, dentistry. I literally applied to the entire lot because I knew that I wanted to go to university and I knew that healthcare was always my calling. I just couldn't figure out what it was. And I remember going to interviews all over the country, a lot of them which I didn't tell my parents about because I just felt the weight and the burden of expectation on me already. And I didn't want to share with them my disappointments and failures, which is something that a lot of young kids do nowadays as well. So I went through all of that alone, only to decide by the end of that 3 years that medicine was for me after all.
No, I mean,
And I just,
yeah, can I just interrupt you right there? I don't want to miss, I mean, you just covered a whole slew of very important topics, and I don't want us to miss the importance of it.
go
So,
on.
I mean, you discussed the importance of realizing and acknowledging that you were doing something that you were having internal conflict with. The fact that you probably, you know, were suffering from depression. Mental health is something that within our community, mental health issues, we don't discuss, right?
Yeah.
Nobody has depression, you know, turn to Allah, you'll be fine. But,
Absolutely.
you know, it's amazing that you're able to recognize that and say, yes, there was a period. I don't think there's anybody, you know, who goes through, you know, career changes and making decisions, just basically life, that doesn't have those feelings, that doesn't feel like, you know, they're
Absolutely.
failing themselves or their family in any way. So I want to acknowledge that. I think it's very important that you recognize the fact that you were having depression or thought you were suffering from depression. And you ended up turning to the dean and finding ways to cope with it instead of just suppressing it. I think that's massively impressive. The second thing that you talked about, and especially within our communities, and I feel like I've went through the same thing with my parents, is
Mm-hmm.
they have set expectations, and they're very, most times they're really high expectations. The fact that you had, your dad to speak up to say, no, I don't think this is right for me, and that he actually listened
Yes.
and supported your decision, I think,
Mm-hmm.
mashallah, that is just absolutely amazing. And so, I think for our young listeners here, you're not going to meet everybody's expectations all the time. So
Absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
absolutely okay to speak up and
Mm-hmm.
say, I don't think this is the path for me, even when you work really, really hard. This is
Mm-hmm.
what I tell my younger cousins and anybody that I give advice to right now is, if your
Mm-hmm.
parents pick and choose your career for you, say
Yeah.
it starts off with a major, who's the person sitting in those classes and who's the person taking those tests? Who's the person
Exactly.
who's going to
Yeah.
have to sit and study, for hours and hours and hours? It's you. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't find it interesting and if you don't find it something, that you look forward to on a daily basis, then, are you,
Hugely problematic.
it's
Yeah.
going to be a huge
And
problem.
you're not going
So
to succeed in it
you're
either. You're
not
not going to succeed because you don't see the value in it. And a
exactly.
lot of us, of course, growing up, a lot of us want to please our parents. You see the hard work and the sacrifices that went into raising us. And I was keenly always aware of that as a child because I was very much in tune with how the rest of my extended family were living. And they were all in Somalia and everybody was struggling. And my dad
Mm-hmm.
was the one who was supporting them. And I always knew the reason that we were here and being raised in the Middle East, for example, was because of the opportunities that my dad made for himself through escaping Somalia. And he would tell us the stories about how he grew up, the
Right.
rough ride he's had. And so, because I was keenly aware of that, and I could see how hard my dad was working to support 9 kids, as well as extended family in Somalia, his siblings and their kids, I just felt like I needed to make sure whatever I did, I had to make my dad proud.
Yeah.
And I'm sure lots of people feel the same way. So, that weight of burden of expectation is always there. But at the same time, you can't lose the focus of what gives you value in your life within all of that. You cannot be living life for your parents or for your spouse or for your friend or for your partner. You have to find the value in what you're doing for you. And if you do, I believe that you'll become successful in it because you want to become successful in it. And naturally, I just believe now looking back, I wish I realized our parents would be happy if we're
Yep.
happy and successful and
Exactly.
productive human beings in society. We're not all born
Regardless.
to be doctors or we're not all born to be engineers and lawyers, which is something that I've found quite hard to reconcile with because as you can imagine now, being a doctor in the Somali community, alhamdulillah, I do get a lot of people who would come up to me and say, Edo, how did you do this? And,
Right.
can you explain this to my child? And I love it when, young kids come up to me and say, I really want to do medicine. How did you get in? And I'll share with them this story that I'm sharing with you right now and tell
Right.
them that it wasn't always so easy. But I don't like it when parents would come up sometimes, not all of them, and they're very well meaning, but they would be like, Lahada, talk to my child, convince him that medicine is the way forward and
Yep.
that he shouldn't be doing creative arts or psychology, whatever else that Somalis look down upon.
Yep.
And tell him that medicine is the way forward. And I almost feel like telling them, this is his life. Are you trying to live through your child?
Right.
Because it sounds like you always wanted to do medicine, but now you want your child to become a doctor to fulfill your, unfinished dreams. And it's not fair
Exactly.
to subject a child through that and allow them to explore their talents and allow them to make their own mistakes. And then they're going to come back with far more experience and therefore be more successful in whatever they do.
Absolutely.
We don't need a world full of doctors. We don't.
We don't. Even though we have a shortage of doctors, I'll just put that in
Oh,
there.
we do. Yep, absolutely.
but if it's
We
not for
absolutely
you,
do.
by no means it is not worth, 20 years of
The
schooling that it
sacrifice.
takes. Yeah, it really doesn't. And then the last thing that I wanted to emphasize that you talked about is saying no. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Even, an opportunity that you feel like anybody would, jump at,
Mm-hmm.
something that you've worked really, really hard for. You made the difficult decision of walking away from an offer that you've worked really, really hard for. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that is a courageous and brave act to say, you know what, it's not for me, even though I've
Mm-hmm.
really worked really, really hard for it. At this point, I don't feel like it's the right thing for me, and to say no. It's scary. And being around a lot of pre-meds, when I was applying to
I
medical
can
school,
imagine. Mm-hmm.
there is absolutely no way someone who's been fighting to get into medical school would walk away. But the fact
Yeah.
that you did that and you spent 3 years exploring and figuring
Yeah.
out what it is that you wanted, how did you go about making that decision and, living with it and actually dealing with it to say, you know what, I've worked really, really hard and now I have it in my hand, but I'm going to let it go. How did you make that decision?
To be honest with you, at the time I made that decision, it came after many months of soul searching. And I remember at the time when I picked up that phone to call my dad, I was convinced within my soul that it is the right decision I'm making to walk away from medicine. So it wasn't that I was haphazard about it. I was for a long time initially, but then I decided that I'm definitely going to walk away from medicine because I thought that it wasn't compatible with the life I wanted to lead. But for me, one of the biggest learning points from that experience, I'm glad it happened. And I feel like it's taught me a lot about myself. And it probably cemented my desire to do medicine. Going through that 3-year process, looking through all the different other professions that I thought I may be remotely interested in and doing all these interviews helped me grow as a person. So it's never a wastage of time. All these experiences accumulated to make me the person I am. And it actually cemented my love for the profession. It cemented my desire to become a physician even more. But at that time, I remember thinking that this is definitely the right decision for me. And that's why I felt able to tell my dad, because it's not that I'm ever scared of my dad, but I really was worried about disappointing him.
Right.
And that fear made me keep my, cards close to my chest for the best part of that year. And therefore, when I decided such conviction towards the end, I decided to tell him. But the following journey after that, subhanAllah, I found myself becoming even more pressured because yes, I wasn't going to do medicine, but I have to make something of myself. I have to get a degree. I have to go to university. Yes, partly to fulfill my parents' aspirations for me, but also because that's how I've always seen myself. I've always seen myself as a career woman, somebody who would be able to contribute to society. And I felt the best way to contribute to society for me was to gain a profession. So I've always had that in me, and that's never left me. It was just a matter of finding out what it was that I was interested in.
Right.
Yeah. And so I went through all that process. And in that time, I've spoken to so many different people, through to admission tutors and consultants and researchers and people who've excelled in their fields and other students. I remember, I'll tell you a funny story. So when I was going through that process, I decided to go back to college because I finished high school at this point. And for us, the natural progression after high school and what we call sixth form is to go directly to university. But because obviously I had that hiatus where I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I decided to just do a couple of other subjects in college just to show the universities that I haven't taken a break from education, and also to give me a reason to wake up in the morning, really, to be honest with you.
Right.
So while I was doing that, I spoke to so many different people, and I've done a lot more research into medicine itself from the people who are actually working in the job. And in that time, they've introduced, actually just before then as well, they've introduced something called the European Working Time Directive, which meant it's a European-wide law where they cannot make you work more than 48 hours a week. And they've introduced a lot of provisions for junior doctors and consultants and people to make sure that it gives them a better work-life balance. And that's something I discovered through some of my conversations with some of the Muslim consultants. And what I also did actually during that time is I would spend a lot of time in the prayer rooms of the university campus in Cardiff City, which is local to me. It wasn't far from my home. But although I wasn't a university student, I was looking for other Muslim females who looked like me. I wasn't looking for Somalis at this point because they were very rare in university at that time. So I was looking for other Muslim women who could talk to me about their experience in university and talk to me about their decision-making process when they're going to careers, because some of the experiences and some of the thoughts I was thinking about in the future for myself aligned more with them rather than the admission tutors and the consultants I was speaking to. And then I realized through speaking to them that you can balance your deen, your life with a medical profession, which was really my biggest fear, really, that I wasn't going to be able to balance it, which is when I realized, and a crack started to open up again. Actually, medicine is not as bad and as horrific as you make it sound out to be in yourself. And again, within that lies one of my biggest lessons that I always tell kids nowadays is speak to people and do work experience in the field, and speak to people in the field about not just the work itself, but how you see it fits within your life. So find out more about the job itself by speaking to people who are on the job. Don't just rely on research that you've done on the internet. Because that's a very biased view based on who the author of that article is. Which is what I think a lot of my research was based on: prospectuses, the books, and the websites.
Right. Yeah.
I wish back then I spoke to more people.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that, I experienced myself. Like, I've always loved surgery, but because I also, love kids and wanted to have a big family, I was drawn away from surgery because of the incompatibility of the two. And most of the time, it's the people who have those experiences, sometimes theirs are skewed as well. They're biased. From my experience, a lot of surgeons are workaholics. Like, it's surgery
Mm-hmm.
and that's it. If you don't prioritize surgery over everything else, you're not a surgeon. Right. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't until I met when I was on the cusp of applying to an internal medicine program that I was doing my last rotation of surgery. Just, I was doing one of the harder ones just to get it out of my system to say, okay, I really enjoyed the service. I met a resident. It was a male. He had a big family. He had 4 kids, and his wife used to bring the kids to campus so, they could spend time with him and see him, during daylight hours. He said to me, training, residency, no matter what it is, no matter what you go through, whether it's internal medicine, family medicine, surgery, OB-GYN, whatever it is, it's going to be a short amount of time. It's finite. It will come to an end.
Right.
Lifestyle
Yeah.
afterwards, as a practicing physician, is how you make it. Whether you want to be a surgeon who works less hours than, the internal medicine doctor, or a medicine doctor who works 10 times harder than the surgeon, lifestyle ultimately is what you make it.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was one of the best pieces of advice that I got. I actually went home and rewrote my
Exactly.
personal statement and took down my applications for internal medicine and applied to surgery.
I can imagine. You just need that glimmer of hope, you know?
Yes,
And
yes.
exactly what you said, you can be what you can't see.
Yep.
And that rings so true in every aspect of, I think, both our journeys. And that's precisely what gave me that fear that I wasn't going to be able to juggle having a family with my dean, with this profession. And that's the bit that gave me a lot of fear. And I thought that once I signed up to medicine, that I would have to, I was so naive as a teenager. I thought once I signed up to medicine that I had to see it through and that there was a sense of finality to it and that, people have invested in you and your education and your parents and your family have invested in that dreams with you. So I cannot walk away. So I thought it might be easier not to embark on that journey altogether.
And I think that's a great lesson to learn from your experience and your journey of saying no, walking away, finding yourself, finding what your true passions are, and then coming back to it. I think we can all learn from that to say, what, no decision is finite. Right.
Absolutely.
You can change your mind. You can go explore other things. And even, if you find something that you feel more passionate about, alhamdulillah. If you find that, what, nothing else will satisfy me and this is what I have to do, then, now you're a lot more prepared for it. Now your aspirations and your ambitions and your drive is more solidified because, you ruled out everything else and you don't have anything holding you back.
Absolutely. And it's always going back to that one point, you will always regret the chances that you don't take.
Right.
You will never regret the chance that you had taken and decided it wasn't for you.
Right.
And that's something that always stuck with me ever since. And this is exactly the kind of things I pass on to kids that I mentor or I see in the career fairs, that it's okay. There are people who have, for example, within my course, who have started doing medicine. Some have left halfway through the course because they decided it's not for them. Some have decided to leave medicine altogether after they finished the 5-year medical degree. So before they started their junior doctor training, and decided that a life of journalism was for them, or finance, or the corporate world, or whatever it is. And some of them have switched, as we do here in the UK, you can switch between specialties, between family physician, between pediatrics. It obviously makes it a little bit more difficult, but nothing is set in stone, and that you're allowed to explore and take the time to explore it. There's no deadline to rush to. And I wish I was told a lot of these things, or I realized that as a teenager or adolescent back then, because it would have helped my journey a lot more. But alhamdulillah, you live and you learn. But then, what happened after that was even more interesting, because at the end of my explorative process, and I decided that medicine was for me, of course, I decided to apply. And then when I started the application process time, it was with a sense of urgency. Because now I'm thinking, I definitely want to do medicine. There's no shadow of a doubt in my mind that this is the one for me. But I had an offer that I declined. And then you get that sense of urgency where you feel like you have to make up for that. So I remember that was an extremely difficult year. And during that year, I had not received a single interview. So I was rejected from all the 4 universities. You were only allowed to apply to 4. So I was rejected from all 4 without an offer of even an interview, alone the final offer. And so at this point, I was thinking to myself, it's 3 years on. Do I really want to put myself through the heartache of reapplying and reapplying and reapplying? But what I did is I sent an email out to all the universities I applied to say, thank you very much for considering my application. I'd be really grateful if you give me some tips and advice on how I can improve my application for the following year. Not knowing truly in my heart whether I was ready to put myself through the emotional journey of another medical application. But I sent out that email, Qadr Allah. It turns out 2 of the universities were trying to get in contact with me.
Oh, wow.
And then there was some mix-up of names, and therefore I was offered an interview for both of them. And this was so late in the end of, it was literally at the point of the year where all the offers have already been made. The interview
Right.
season had finished months ago. People were starting to
MashaAllah.
apply for their student finance. SubhanAllah. I just remember thinking, that email was just going to fall into their junk.
Mhm.
Because a lot of the time they don't give you feedback on your applications. You just get a rejection on this online portal and that's it. But they re-emailed me back to say, we were looking for you. I have a feeling it's something to do with, how Somali names are never ending. And there was a mix-up between my surname and my fourth name and my fifth name.
Oh my God.
Gotta thank your Somali name for that. Because they were looking for a Samira Yusuf when it was Samira Hassan. I'm like, oh my God, it was just a major mix-up.
my
But
God,
alhamdulillah, I'm so glad I emailed them. Qadrallah, wallahi, it's how God works in mysterious ways.
Yep.
And I ended up having the two most, I don't know how to describe it. It wasn't your conventional medical school interviews because there was no panel. The interview season had finished.
Oh, wow.
So what I had was literally a conversation over cake and tea with the admissions tutors in both the universities.
Mm-hmm.
And they just asked me about my childhood, about my life, about Somalia in general. It was almost like two friends catching up over tea.
Wow.
And alhamdulillah, at the end of both of them, I ended up having, one of them I had an unconditional offer because I already had the high school grades that were required.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one I had a conditional offer because obviously they were aware of the fact that I was going through, a part-time college course. And so they just decided to peg my offer onto those grades. So of course I took the one that was unconditional.
You're like, I'm in.
I was like, I'm in. I don't care about any exams or any
That's awesome.
any other results. I was, oh my God, that year, subhanAllah, the emotional turmoil that you go through is subhanAllah. So I went for that. And that was the University of London. It's a university called St. George's, University of London.
Wow.
Which is where I did my first year of medical school. Little known fact, that is where I was accepted into medical school. But then, alhamdulillah, I transferred after the first year back to Cardiff University because of, family issues and I had to look after my nan. Alhamdulillah, they accepted the transfer for personal reasons. I did the rest of the 4 years in Cardiff and I graduated from Cardiff.
MashaAllah.
So, yeah,
You just have like
journey.
so, yes, it is a crazy journey, but it's, so many golden nuggets in there. The fact that you didn't take, just a rejection as is. You said, what can I learn from this? What can I do next? Even if you weren't sure whether you were going to apply next, you sought out that feedback. I think, failure and rejection, that's one of the things that, I like to talk about a lot because I think it's false narrative to paint everything as, perfection, right? You're expected to get perfect grades, you get accepted to really good schools, and, it's all rainbows and sunshine. You will get rejected. You will get, sometimes not even the courtesy of a rejection. It will just be like silence on the other end, right? It's what do you do with that makes a huge difference, right?
That deafening silence, yes.
Yes,
absolutely.
The fact that you don't hear anything back. There's a lot you can learn from that feedback to say, what can I do better? What is it about my application that didn't make me a good candidate, that didn't make me a good enough candidate for you to reach out to? And, something like this could happen where they really wanted you, but you got, your Somali name got in the way of your opportunities, right? It could be as simple as that. Yeah. Or they could come back and say, you know what? It's a problem with your application, how it's presented. You need to do research. You need volunteer hours. You need to show us why you want to be a doctor or why you want to go into this field or specialty or whatnot. Without that feedback, how are you going to know what to do anything different next year? What is the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and over and expecting a different result.
Different results, absolutely.
Right?
No, definitely. I think we spend a lot of time, after a failure or rejection, licking our wounds.
Yep.
And it is hard. And to this very day, of course, if you come across a failure and rejection, depending on the impact and obviously the value attached to it, it's hard to, not just crumble and, get swept away with tears and a feeling of despair and a feeling of guilt and regret.
Right.
And it's okay to feel that. I have to remind myself and my younger siblings as well. It's okay, process those feelings because obviously you put your heart and soul into this and you didn't get what you wanted. So you have to remember two things. It's okay to go through that feeling of grief and rejection and failure, but try your best to, once you've processed that, to stand back up again, make lots of dua, make lots of prayer and start again. And that start again could just simply mean going back to reanalyze what it is about your application, just like you said. What is it about your CV or your university application that was found wanting? or gain that feedback from the very people who have rejected you. And that, I think, is one of the most hardest things for humans to do. Get back up and to ask the same person who's rejected you for feedback on how to improve. Because oftentimes you're already feeling very raw and vulnerable.
Yeah.
But that is one of the most important and defining moments of people's lives, because you don't want to feel like you're stuck in the position where you failed and have not learned from it, because then it's a true failure.
Yep.
It's then a wasted experience, a wasted valuable lesson.
Yep.
So it's important to use your failures and turn it into something positive.
Yep. Failing forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah. One of my certain colleagues says, fall 7 times, get up 8 times.
Indeed. Yes.
Right. So every failure, I think, is an opportunity for you to learn, how to grow and how to do things better and how to improve and go forward.
Yeah, there's always a silver lining. There's always a hidden blessing. And I believe there's always a hidden lesson. Just look for them and you'll find them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So what are your current projects that you're working on as far as your community outreach? We follow Samira on social media. We'll link her contacts in the show notes so you can see all the wonderful work that she does. But for our listeners to follow on what's happening with you, can you tell us a little bit about the initiatives that you're involved in currently and what topics you're focusing on?
Sure. So alhamdulillah, I got to the stage where I was able to balance my passions and my interests outside medicine with my career. And that's the most beautiful thing as well about this profession, which I wish somebody told 19-year-old Samira. But alhamdulillah. So at the moment, I work as a full-time family physician, or GP, we call it here in the UK, general practitioner. But I often tell my work colleagues and my managers about the work I do, and they often want to get involved. So currently, and over the past few years, I have been involved in careers fairs. So I primarily run the career fair within my city of Leicester, but I also am involved in careers fairs and helping organize or sometimes leading on them in other cities across the UK, because oftentimes people will contact me to understand how to go about the recruitment, the layout, the venue, so on and so forth. So that's one of the things I do. The second thing I'm very passionate about is health advocacy, community education in health, and health awareness in various topics that I feel are very relevant to the Somali community at large, particularly things like mental health, which is one of the things I've been working on. And coincidentally, I've got my second mental health event coming up this weekend, actually, in Leicester, alhamdulillah. And it's for the entire community. And the idea is to get a holistic viewpoint and perspective and understanding of what mental health means, not only to the medical world, but as a community, because I feel like a lot of cultural and religious connotations are attached to it that can sometimes be quite negative. Mm-hmm. So I felt it was really important to address that. And part of the health awareness and community outreach work that we do with the British Somali Medical Association will involve cancer screening and awareness of common diseases in the Somali community, like diabetes and cardiovascular problems, but also touching upon sensitive and ethical topics such as do not resuscitate and organ donation and things like that, which I see time and time again people struggle with. And I just feel like it would be important to have that discussion outside the hospital setting, so people can have a broader understanding and know their rights and not feel... Because I find a lot of people often tell me, as in the Somali community, I can't trust these doctors. They don't want to give me the right treatment because I'm Somali or because I'm Black, or they don't want to send me for that referral because they want to save their resources. Or one of the things I always used to say, my late grandfather, who was a cousin of my grandmother, in Cardiff, he used to say, I would not be hospitalized because I know they're going to harvest my organs. Wow. But subhanAllah, he needed angiography one day because he had a heart attack, and he refused, because he believed that was a ploy to harvest his organs.
Wow.
He passed away now, but subhanAllah. And some of these health beliefs really need to be, tackled, and we need to discuss them openly.
Yeah, I think...
And that's why I'm very passionate about it.
It's basic, health literacy. A lot of times these conversations, these very difficult conversations about complex topics are being had in a moment of despair when emotions are high. I frequently get calls about, families refusing, life-saving operations because they just simply don't understand indications, and, their loved ones are at risk of complications or not getting, important interventions because there is just, a lack of health literacy. So I absolutely commend that work, and I'd love to see it, expand onto a global level. Just absolutely amazing. Well, Samira, thank you so much for enlightening us with, great, just absolutely amazing life lessons from your experiences. and the amazing work you do for the Somali youth and the Somali community. For
Thank
our
you, Khalid.
listeners, just awe-inspiring, everything. How can our listeners reach out to you if they have any questions, concerns, things that they want to discuss with you, to pick your brain? What's the
Sure.
best way to get in touch with you?
So I'm on several social media platforms, which has become a problem, by the way. I need to detox very soon. But I can be contacted on Facebook. My Facebook name is Samira Layali Hassan. Don't ask me why there's Layali in there. Long story. I'm on LinkedIn as well as Dr. Samira Hassan. I'm on Instagram as Dr. Samra. I think you're going to link all of that below, aren't you?
Yes, we'll link all of them below.
Yeah, and then I'm also on Twitter as well as Dr. Samira Hassan. So happy to be contacted through any of these mediums, inshallah. And I've had a few contacts actually with a few of your US colleagues as well. So I'm really excited to see what happens, inshallah, from that, just to share ideas and explore and brainstorm. Because there's Somali Medical Associations, mashallah, in the US, but there's also one in Sweden and I think in Norway. So there's a lot of cross-collaborative work and learning that can be had. So I'm excited for that.
Awesome. Absolutely amazing. Any last words of advice you want to leave with our listeners today?
I would just say two things. Go with your guts and always try your hardest and leave the rest to God. And then the second thing I really love, and it's a quote I heard from an interview with Lupita Nyong'o actually a while back, and it really resonated with me. And that is, do something in the world that without you may never have existed.
MashaAllah. I love that.
I love
Absolutely love that.
Make your mark and don't be afraid. Just do it.
Just do it. All right. And
Absolutely.
with that, we will leave you guys. Thank you so much to Dr. Samira Hassan for joining us today. And inshallah, we will see you guys on the next episode.
Thank you, Khalid.
Thank you for tuning into the Professional Muslim Women Podcast, the place for Muslim women to inspire and be inspired.
Please join us on our Facebook group, Professional Muslim Women, to continue the conversation and connect with Muslim women like you. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and drop us a like or a review.
We look forward to hearing from you soon.